All right, class. I'm gonna start here. Um, Social Security is it's a topic that I feel like impacts us all, um, given that many of our parents and grandparents depend on Social Security, and we pay into it through our payroll taxes, and it's something that um, we, in theory, are expected to get in return. I mean, we're paying for it now, and so I just want to go through this though and explain kind of what's going on with Social Security, and then talk about what your task is to do. So I think your goal would be to kind of understand what's going on with Social Security, the extent of it, meaning like what are the details in terms of how it's going to be paid out in the future and why there might be trouble. Why is there going to be trouble? So, what has caused this issue? And then, is there any way to solve it? Okay. So, um, if we were sitting in class, I would say, well, why would this be a social problem? And I think you all would come up with a variety of answers, but I think for many, it's that especially for lower income folks, Social Security becomes kind of like a potential retirement. And I mean, I know that you know it would be fantastic if I could depend on Social Security as I head into retirement. And that's a long way away from me. But my financial advisor has warned me to, and in fact is in no part of our retirement plan to depend on Social Security. He kind of said if you get it, it's kind of a bonus, but certainly you wouldn't want to depend on it. So the first thing I want to do though is I want to differentiate some terms here because there when people see the term or sorry when people see the acronym SSI, it actually refers to supplemental security income. I think some folks think of it as Social Security income, but it's actually supplemental security income. And this is different, and I'm not even going to get into it because it's not part of Social Security. But it is not the same as Social Security. Social Sec- Social Security, and I think I have this on the next slide, but I'll just go to it, and come back. Old age survivors insurance (OASI) and disability insurance (DI). So when we talk about Social Security, what we're talking about is this combination of OASI-DI. So it's um, the folks who are on retirement benefits, which would be old age survivor insurance, and then you have folks who are on disability insurance. Okay, so um, when we discuss Social Security, we are bringing together old age survivor insurance and disability insurance. And I'll talk about how that's funded in a second, but realize that at one point in our past, actually for quite some time, we had more money coming in than we were paying out, and because we had that surplus, we created trust funds. Okay, these trust funds accrue interest, and we kind of think of them as well. If we need to lean on them at some point, if we need to dip into them at some point to help pay out, then that's what they're here for. Okay, so how does it work? Um, well, we pay taxes, and that is what we consider to be income or revenue. Okay, And then we pay people, we send Social Security checks out. We would consider those to be program costs. Okay. When we have um, more money coming in than we're paying out, we would consider that to be a surplus, and the surplus funds would go into the trust funds. And when costs would exceed revenue, there would be a deficit. And in order to pay all of those costs, so to pay out all the benefits, because we didn't have enough taxes collected, we would dip into the trust funds to help cover that. Okay. Again, if there's an annual, on an annual basis, if there's a surplus, we put that into the trust fund. If there's a deficit, then we pull from the trust fund to help cover those costs and be able to pay out the full benefits. Okay. So in the programs, and I'm talking about the trust fund. Sorry, I'm talking about the Social Security program. In its 84-year history, 21.9 trillion has been collected, 19 trillion has been paid out, and that leaves 2.9 trillion left in the trust funds based on last year's data. Okay. By law, the trust funds are, think of them as serving. Think of the trust funds as as stocks almost. Okay, and so they invest the trust funds to accrue interest. Okay, that interest is considered to be income. So now we have the income. We have the taxes that are coming in that we consider to be income, but we also consider the interest amount on the trust funds to be considered as income as well. Okay. Let's go back a couple years, and then we'll talk about 2020. 2016, the surplus of total income, including interest, was 35 billion. When interest was excluded, there was a deficit of 53 billion. So, and the projection from that. So, what I've asked you to look over was the Social Security trustees, the Board of Trustees report, and there's a long, lengthy report. It's over 200 pages, and then I asked you to look over the summary. But each year they basically just write a narrative on what's going on with Social Security. So what are the projections? And in 2016, the trustees projected that there would be an annual non-interest deficit um, that would average each year around 51 billion. Okay, so and we'll talk about why the interest is important, because at some point, right, if the trust funds are depleted, then you would need to have you wouldn't want to count on that interest. Okay. In 2020, although previous reports did project continued annual deficits, 2020 is actually, this year we are actually projected to have a surplus, which was not the projection in 2016. Let's talk about the concern though. After the year 2021, interest income and redemption of trust fund asset reserves from the general fund of the Treasury will provide the resources needed to offset Social Security annual deficits until 2035. So what does that mean? Okay, that means that we're not starting next year. It's expected or projected that we will not have enough taxes. We're not have enough income coming in, including the interest, to cover our expenses, to pay out full benefits. So what we will be doing is, or what Social Security will be doing, is they will be starting to dig into the trust funds. Okay, that the trust fund reserves are expected to be depleted, fully depleted for total for OSDI. You'll see when you look on the document that they do have that the trust funds have different depletion dates for disability and then Social Security. But when you bring them together and look at the total trust funds combined, you'll see that those trust funds will be depleted by 2035. Thereafter, scheduled tax income is projected to be sufficient to pay about 3/4 of scheduled benefits to the end of the projection period of 2094. So what does this mean? It means that starting in 2035, that we will no longer have any trust funds to dig into. And so what does that mean? That means that we need to have a sustainable income, taxes coming in to cover our expenses. That is not currently the projection. The projection is that the amount of income, taxes coming in, would only cover about 3/4 of benefits to be paid out. That's the problem, okay? So again, to clarify, after the year 2020, income, including interest, will not cover the costs, and therefore we will begin to deplete the trust funds. The remaining trust fund balances will still accrue interest, which is considered income. However, as the balances shrink, so does the interest income. The goal then, if we continue to deplete these, our trust fund balances, would be to get to a point in 2035 where the program was self-sustaining, meaning that you wouldn't need a trust fund. You wouldn't need the trust funds to dip into. Instead, what we would hope for is that there would be enough taxes coming in to cover all costs. So income would cover all costs. Why might this be unlikely? Well, let's talk about what's created this problem. So the baby boomers, this is the population generation that we talk about that's born between 1946 and 1964, and will have already started to retire and will retire through 2031. Realize that folks can start to get on Social Security as early as age 62. I'm going to get into those ages here in a little bit. The issue, though, is with the baby boomers is that the number of beneficiaries is going to rise rapidly. And because of our birth rates being lower, that means that fewer people are going to be contributing fewer people are going to be in the labor force contributing to these taxes. And also, we have to realize that life expectancy has risen. Okay, so instead of folks dying at, instead of our life expectancy being at age 65, or 55 or whatever it might have been if we go back, now we're seeing a life expectancy. It's a little high. We can break it down by demographics. It is a little bit higher for women, but we do see it, right around 70, and so that's definitely much different than what people were projecting when this program was developed. So you can see that in 1950 there were 16 workers to each retiree. And by 2035, we're going to see 2 workers per retiree, and not to mention we see people living longer. So this is what's creating the problem with Social Security. Okay, we did talk about this. So let's talk about how it's broken down. This, I think, is where the light bulb goes off, where people did not realize this was the case. There's a max amount that folks pay Social Security. So, all right, for just about everything else, like we pay taxes on all of our income, right? So if I make $1 million a year, I do have to pay, unless I'm super savvy and know how to loophole it or whatever. But let's just say I'm a normal, like, ethical citizen. Um, if I make $1 million, I pay taxes on that $1 million, and in fact, those taxes actually increase. Um, so I don't have the tax bracket in front of me. It's not really important. It is what we call a progressive tax system. So I might pay a lower percentage on the first 100,000 that I make, and then a slightly greater percentage on the next 100,000, and then a greater percentage on the 500,000 to a million. But ultimately, I am paying taxes on all of my earnings. Okay. With Social Security, you only pay on your first 137,000. So if I earn $1 million, I'm only paying tax. I'm only paying Social Security taxes on 137,700. Okay. So if I am earning $1 million and your family earns 137,700, we would pay exactly the same in Social Security taxes. Okay. So it's 12.4% total. 10% goes Social Security. 1% goes, and 10.6 goes Social Security. 1.8 goes disability. Gives us 12.4% total. And so if you work for a company, you would pay 6.2% would come out of your paycheck, and your employer would pay the other 6.2%. If you're self-employed, you would cover the full 12.4%. There are loopholes, of course, to how we pay folks. So, like many folks who make millions and millions of dollars, or worth millions and millions of dollars, they get this through stock packages rather than just salaries. I'm pretty sure, like Elon Musk, for example, the majority of his earnings come in stock packages. So anyway, Google CEO last year earned $2 million, but $240 million in stock packages, and so his Social Security contribution again would be the same as someone who, as a couple, for example, earning 137,000. So again, earn 2 million, only pays on the first 137,700. Okay. This is, again, if you don't remember this from intro, just a reminder: the wealthiest 1% of the population in the United States has a wealth. When you add up their wealth together, it is worth more than everyone else combined. Okay, just to remember that. If you're not sure when you're going to retire, and again, some of you might even be born after the year 2000, which makes me feel old since I graduated high school in 2001. But someone born in so I'm looking at retirement age. If I'm thinking around 70, that's going to put me somewhere in the 2050s, which is well past the trust fund depletion date. So of course I should have some concern. When can you collect? Excuse me. So the age has changed a little bit. Um, they have allowed for folks to opt to take a lesser amount if they want to um, start taking it before age 67. So you can actually start collecting at age 62. It just, you won't get the full amount as you would get if you waited till 67. And they also given you the option to collect more if you decide to wait till after So if you decide to wait till age 69 or 70. So what is the trustees saying to us? Each passing year of legislative inaction reduces the likelihood that a solution can be found that is acceptable to lawmakers on both sides of the political aisle. The trustees are worried that that nothing is going to happen to fix the Social Security issue. Who are the trustees? It's the Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Health and Human Services, and the Commissioner of Social Security, 2 public representatives appointed by the President. Those have been vacant for several years now. Should you care? That's, I guess, up to you. To me, personally, I do care. I'm okay with, in some instances, paying into something and not getting anything in return. However, there are many people who are going to depend on Social Security. I think I've mentioned this to you, but because of my student loan debt, that puts me in a very different situation than if I didn't have student loan debt. So while my wife's a school teacher and I'm a college professor and we do make okay money, having $100,000 in student loan debt, which is a payback amount of close to $400,000, that puts me in a much different situation financially when it comes to monthly income and payout. And so instead of maybe investing $1,000 a month in some sort of retirement, 401k or stock options, whatever it might be, that $1,000 a month goes to student loan bills. So I am not even close to where I need to be in terms of retirement with my financial advisor suggestions and recommendations. And so, yes, paying into Social Security, it's not just the 6.2 coming directly out of your paycheck, but your employer's matching that. So that's potential an additional 6.2% that you could be earning. Trustees, they understand the problem, and they have made recommendations. That's kind of what I am hoping you'll do, is you'll understand what's going on and make a recommendation on how we should move forward with Social Security. I'm going to talk to you about my idea. This is not by any means, does not have to be your idea. It's just something that I feel might be fair. So now we pay Medicare tax. It comes out of our paycheck as well, and that's on all income. It's on all taxable income. Okay. If we look at the folks that earn above the 137,700, now it is very difficult to find exact data. So how many families make over 137,700? That I don't know. What we do know is that and it does vary by year, but there is approximately 8 to 10% of the population, this is family income, household income, that earn over 150,000 per year. So what do we know? That this is the number, and we'll lowball everything. That way our projections are very conservative. We also know that there's about 1% of the population that earn a minimum of $500,000 a year. Okay. So if we break it down, which I realize that this is based on 2013 data because the math is complicated, so please forgive me for not redoing all the math. The number of households are very close to this, and again, I'm looking at minimum numbers. So all I'm trying to do is get across the point here. So 123 million households filed taxes in 2013. 5.3% reported earning in that range of 150 to 199,000. 5.3% of 123 million is 6.5 million households. 3.8% reported earning between 2 and 500,000 per year. These are again household income. 3.8% of 123 million is 4.6 million households, and we'll just stick with 1%. Reported 500 earning 500,000 or more, and 1% of 123 million is going to be over a million, but we're going to lowball it at a million households. Okay. My recommendation would be to move the cap from 137,700 to 500,000. What happens if we move the cap from 137,700 to 500,000? Again, looking at what we just talked about. These are the numbers that I just went over. Okay, so now let's make sense of the math. So I gave the most conservative amount. So if X number of families earn between 150 and 200,000, I'm basing everything on the lowest number, 150,000. Okay. So we already know that they've paid taxes on the first 137,000, right? So 150,000 minus 137,000 leaves us with 13,000 that needs to be taxed. Okay. So the tax rate on that would be 12.4%. 12.4% of 13,000 is roughly $1,612. So $1,612 would be the additional amount that a family earning between $150,000 and $200,000 would be expected to pay under this new cap of $500,000. $1,612 multiplied by all 6.5 million households gets us to about $10.5 billion. Okay. Now, the families that earn between 200 and 500,000. Again, we're going with the lowest, the most conservative number at 200,000 because we're not sure how many make 210,000, 500,000, 480, whatever. But we know they all earn at least 200,000. They've already paid on the first 137,000, so 200 minus 137 gets us to 63,000. Okay, we have to tax 63,000 at 12.4%, which is now $7,800 more that this household earning 200,000 would have to pay. When we multiply 7,800 by 4.6 million, that gives us roughly $36 billion in additional revenue. And then if we take the 500,000 and we subtract the amount that they've already paid, that gives us an additional 363,000 that we're going to tax at the 12.4%, which is roughly, might even be exactly 45,000. Multiplied by the million households gives us right around $45 billion in additional income. So by moving the tax rate to 500,000 instead of 137,700, we would have an additional tax income of $91.5 billion. Okay. The projected annual deficit that will begin in 2021 is expected to be roughly 1% for several years, growing through 2095. A 1% decrease in OSDI income would be a decrease in just over $11 billion. Okay. Based on this year's costs of these are strange numbers, but if we base it on this year's numbers and next year's projected income, okay, so that means we're taking away the 11 billion of the 1% decrease. I know this sounds complicated, but next year that would be a deficit of 7 billion. Okay, but by moving the cap to 500,000, there would be a surplus of over 80 billion, which I think would be if we take the 91, let's go back, the 91.5 billion, and we subtract the 7 billion, that gives us over 80 billion in surplus. So the 1-year deficit of 7 billion would be absorbed by the 91.5 billion in surplus. And when we subtract the 7 billion of the deficit, we subtract the 7 billion from the 91.5 billion in surplus, that would give us well over 80 billion. That could be going into the trust funds and then developing interest. Obviously, this is not a welcoming approach by folks who would have to pay more, because it would be that they would have to pay more. However, I don't necessarily look at this as an attack on the wealthy, because I would think that a progressive tax approach would be more of an attack on the wealthy, because a progressive tax approach would mean that your tax percentage would go up as you head into higher income tax brackets. This is a flat tax. Okay. And we're basing it on low ball numbers up to 500,000. So you could even, instead of doing it on all income, you could say, well, if you make over $200,000 and you fall in the $200,000 to $500,000 bracket, that you only pay on your first $200,000. If you make $1 million, you only pay the 500 up to the 500,000. You'd only be taxed on that amount. So my rationale is, of course, based on if we wanted to keep Social Security, right? So there may be proposals that you come up with where we somehow phase out Social Security, or we attempt to make it a singular Social Security model. To me, and again, this is just my thought, this just seems to be the most fair approach. The other ideas could be to actually increase that tax percentage, which I don't think people really want, especially middle class, lower income folks. Moving that 12.4% to, let's say, 13, 15%, right? That is probably going to be less liked by the masses. Or we figure out a way to lessen our dependency on Social Security. And how we do that, I think, is tricky, because we have so many folks who are dependent on Social Security as retirement income. Okay. So your goal, and I have some questions for you on D2L, is to write a recommendation explaining what's going on. But what I'm curious as to how you feel we should move forward and address the Social Security issue. Okay.